I showed my husband a silly joke, he got angry and left. Then I found out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone. I usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first time posting here. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the one writing something like this, especially since my husband, 30 male, and I, 27 female, always had what I thought was a perfect marriage. Sure, we had small arguments like everyone else, but overall, everything seemed great. We got married in April 2021, and life since then had been smooth until a few days ago. That afternoon, we came home from a lunch with some friends, let's call them Kai and Marie, who recently got engaged. It was just a casual lunch, nothing dramatic. We even brought home some amazing pasta, which I'm eating right now because it's too cold for ice cream. We live in a tiny apartment. My husband went to shower first while I cleaned up the leftovers. When it was my turn, I showered, and afterward I squeezed too much lotion. I rubbed it in, but there was still some left on my fingers. So I did what any totally reasonable adult would do. I drew a smiley face with little hair on my thumb. I proudly walked out of the bathroom giggling and said, "Look, it's the lotion man!" He didn't laugh. He just stared at my hand and blinked. I kept joking around, talking in a silly voice, saying random nonsense, trying to make him smile, but after a minute or two, he just stood up and walked out. I thought he was still joking, so I laughed and asked where he was going, but he grabbed his truck keys and left. He always keeps his pickup stocked after road trips, clothes, snacks, everything, so it didn't immediately hit me that he was really leaving. When I finally realized, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. I texted him several times. He replied once saying he needed to think things over and that he was staying with his brother, Tyler. Since then, he hasn't answered or even read my messages. His brother isn't replying either. I've just been sitting here, staring at the door, replaying everything over and over. We've been together for years. I've always been a little goofy. It's part of who I am. And he's always found it cute. Now I feel like an idiot for making that stupid little lotion man joke and not realizing something was off. He's never left the house like that before, even during hard times. I'm trying to give him space, but I can't stop overthinking. Divorce sounds like a nightmare. I keep asking myself, was my dumb little lotion man joke really that bad? How do I even begin to fix this?
Update 1. I followed your advice and gave him space. Reading your comments made me question how accurate my idea of our perfect marriage really was. I still believe we were good together, but maybe I missed something. Anyway, some of you were right. It wasn't really about the lotion man, but you were also partly wrong. Something did happen during that lunch with our friends. My husband came back a couple of days ago. He apologized and said he wanted to talk. I agreed. I missed him so much, even though I tried not to show it. He told me the whole story. So, we had lunch with our friends, Kai, 30M, and Marie, 29F. They'd just gotten engaged. It was a buffet-style restaurant, so people kept getting up for food. At some point, my husband and Marie went together. Or maybe it was near the end. I remember chatting with Kai alone for a while before they came back. Either way, they were alone briefly. Marie apparently confessed to my husband that when Kai proposed, she realized she was actually in love with him. But she still said yes to Kai and tried to suppress her feelings. That's why she invited us to lunch as some kind of closure. But instead of closure, she told my husband she wanted to run away with him. Marie is annoyingly gorgeous. Blonde, blue-eyed, tall and thin like a runway model. Think Emma Watson, but colder. I hate how much that bothers me. My husband said he politely turned her down and wished her well, but admitted that her confession messed with his head. We all went to college together, so we've known each other for years. When I came out of the shower later that day, laughing with a towel on my head and making silly jokes with the lotion man, he said something in him just snapped. According to him, my immaturity in that moment clashed with how mature and graceful Marie had seemed. It triggered some sort of emotional panic about our marriage, so he ran off to his brother's place. He claims that after a few days apart, he realized how much he loved me and came home. I just stared at him in disbelief. I asked a few questions, then told him to sleep on the couch for the night. He agreed. I didn't sleep at all. I still can't believe he almost threw away our marriage over some emotional fantasy with a woman who's engaged. The more I think about it, the harder it is to even look at him. We've since had Thanksgiving dinner with his family and even spent a night together again. I think he believes everything is fine now. And honestly, part of me wants to forgive and move on, just to feel normal again. But I don't know what to do next. He'll be home from work in about 6 hours. I'm a teacher, so I have the day off, and my brain's been spinning with options all morning. A. Tell Kai what his fiancée did. My husband begged me not to, saying Marie just had a moment of weakness. B. Contact Marie directly, either to confront her or to have a calm talk, though that sounds unlikely. C. Call Tyler, my husband's brother, and ask if my husband ever really stayed with him. His house is uncomfortably close to Marie's, and that makes me nervous. D. Do all of the above. I honestly don't know what I'll do yet. I showed my husband a silly joke, and he got angry, walked out, and never came back. Turns out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone. This is usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first post here. Honestly, I never thought I'd write something like this. My husband, 30M, and I, 27F, always seemed great together. Sure, we had little arguments now and then, but overall, it felt like a fairy tale. We got married in April 2021, and everything since then had gone smoothly. Or so I thought. That afternoon, we'd just gotten home from lunch with our engaged friends. Let's call them Kai and Marie. It was a nice, ordinary get-together. We even brought home some amazing pasta. Since our apartment is tiny, my husband took a shower first while I cleaned up. After he was done, I went in. When I got out, I put some lotion on, accidentally squeezed out too much, and wiped off the extra. On a whim, I drew a little lotion smiley face on my thumb. A lotion man. I walked out giggling and said something like, "Look, it's a lotion man!" He just stared at me. No smile, no reaction, just blinked. I tried to keep the joke going in a silly voice, rambling and laughing, thinking he'd eventually laugh too. Instead, he stood up and left. At first, I thought he was joking, but he grabbed his keys, got into his truck, and drove away. At first, I didn't believe it. Then panic hit. His truck was still packed from a recent trip, enough stuff for a couple of weeks. I texted him several times. He only replied once, saying he was thinking about things and staying at his brother's Tyler's. Since then, he stopped answering. Hours passed. I just stared at the door in disbelief. I felt stupid. All this over a dumb lotion joke? He'd never left like that before, not even during rough times. I kept replaying it in my head, wondering what I'd done wrong.
First update. I followed the advice people gave me and gave him space. But reading everyone's comments made me think maybe our perfect marriage wasn't as perfect as I believed. And turns out you were right about something happening during that lunch. My husband came back a couple of days later, apologized, and said he wanted to talk. He told me that while I was chatting with Kai, Marie had confessed to him that she was in love with him and had been since college. She said she'd accepted Kai's proposal, hoping the feelings would fade, but seeing my husband again brought everything back. She even asked him to leave me for her. He said he turned her down and wished her well, but he admitted that the confession messed with his head, that he started comparing us. Marie was beautiful, confident, and composed. Meanwhile, I'd been goofing around in a towel, laughing about a lotion face. He said it made him suddenly question our whole relationship, and that's why he panicked and left. I was speechless. He said he realized how stupid it was and that he still loved me. I told him to sleep on the couch. Since then, he's been acting like everything's fine again, but I can't unhear what he said, that another woman's confession made him doubt me. I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way. He thinks we can just move on, but I'm torn. Part of me still loves him. Another part wants to scream. I've been thinking about telling Kai what Marie did, but my husband begged me not to, saying she just made a mistake. I'm not sure I believe that. Second update. Thank you all so much for the love and support. Seriously, I didn't expect such kindness. My last post was deleted, but here's what happened since. I took your advice. I talked to everyone involved. Kai, Marie, my husband, and Tyler. What I found out completely shattered me. When I met with Kai, I told him everything I knew. He was skeptical at first, then broke down crying. Turns out Marie had told him nothing. Together, we went to confront her. At first, she denied everything. Then she snapped. The truth came out, and it was so much worse than I imagined. My husband wasn't innocent. He was the one who'd started everything. He had suggested to Marie that before she officially married Kai, the three of them, him, Marie, and another woman, should spend a night together, and Marie had agreed. Apparently, this wasn't new. She'd been cheating on Kai for years, with both men and women, and my husband had been cheating on me just as long. They covered for each other. Marie said she backed out of that threesome idea at the last minute because she wanted to be faithful now that she was engaged. My husband got angry, and not long after, I showed him the lotion man. He snapped, left, and ran off. Later I spoke with Tyler. He said my husband came over around 11 p.m. and left at 8 a.m., meaning there were about 3 hours unaccounted for. He guessed my husband might have just driven around to clear his head, but that didn't sound like him. That night, when my husband fell asleep early, I went through his phone. At first, nothing. Then I found a hidden folder, and there they were, dozens of nudes. Not mine, not Marie's either, from another woman. Let's call her Allison. Stunning redhead, hourglass figure. Their messages went back to February, right before Valentine's Day when I was planning a surprise for him. She didn't even know he was married until recently. When she found out, she was furious. And here's the part that made me sick. My husband told her he would bring me to a hotel to prove that I was okay with their affair. Sound familiar? It was the same idea he'd pitched to Marie. After that, I couldn't even pretend anymore. The next morning, I packed my things. He cried, begged, swore he loved only me, blamed his weakness for redheads, said I was the only one that mattered. I told him it was over. The apartment is in his name, so I left. Right now, I'm staying with Kai. He's heartbroken too. We both are. I don't know what comes next, divorce, therapy, or just trying to survive this. But at least now, I know the truth. His fiancée meant everything to him. We sat together for a long time, hugging, crying, saying all kinds of nonsense, just trying to hold ourselves together. He tried to cheer me up and made lunch. It turned out great. He's an amazing cook. I showed him my 2 previous posts, and he laughed at some of your comments. As far as I know, my almost ex-husband is now with Marie. I don't care about them. Honestly, it even feels kind of nice, like a chapter has finally closed and I don't have to tiptoe around anymore like I did these past few days. Tomorrow, Kai and I are going to the gym for yoga, to relax and maybe figure out what to do next. We both took a day off, and I'm sorting out my finances. I hope to start the divorce process soon, so I can finally call him my ex. I'm still a complete mess. My desk is still covered with our photos, and our wedding picture is still the wallpaper on all my devices. I know my students will notice his sudden disappearance from my life, and I'll have to tell them that the guy I used to talk so much about is now divorcing me. I'll have to tell my family and friends too, the ones who are my main support right now. It hurts to realize that eventually Kai and I will have to move out separately, because he's the only real support I have in this whole mess. Housing, divorce expenses, lawyers, therapy. Sigh, so much ahead. It's hard to believe I once thought this relationship was perfect. Anyway, Thank you all so much. I've already written about how much support I've received here, but honestly, your sincerity and kindness, without exaggeration, saved my life. I would have kept living with that cheater otherwise, and Kai too. This community is incredible. So many kind people who care, follow my story, and wish me well. I'll definitely come back for advice again, but please know I've read everything, yes, everything, and I've seen all your kind words. Author's note. I've been scrolling through the comments for a while now, and honestly, I'm amazed at how many people responded to my story. There's a lot I need to clarify, so here we go. Not much has changed. It's only been a week since my last update. My husband and I briefly talked about the upcoming divorce, that's all. I'm still healing, working, and slowly getting back to myself. Ask me again in a year, maybe I'll be better then. As for Allison, the mistress, I still haven't been able to contact her, though some of your advice really inspired me to try again. And about Kai and me, I know many of you are discussing this, so I'll clarify right away. Kai and I are rebuilding our friendship. Honestly, I don't think we'd work as a couple. Kai wants a calm and independent life for two, while I dream of having kids. He admitted that he has a very low libido, one of the reasons he blames himself for everything that happened. And mine, on the contrary, is high. Plus, now we're more like brother and sister. Still, thank you for worrying about my options. I'm not ready to date yet, and probably won't be for a while. This story is fake. Huh, gotcha. Just kidding. I wish it were fake. No curses on you if you don't believe me. Not everything on the internet can be trusted, and I doubt I can convince you otherwise. But unfortunately, yes, I live in this reality, and no hate messages will change that.
About family, friends, students, and so on. My family is, of course, on my side. Most of our mutual friends, too. Yes, I told my students everything, and you know what? They were incredibly supportive. I've already cleared my desk of all reminders of him. The next step is to clear my head of that lotion-scented man. I tried to recreate his look as best I could. I'll post a photo on my profile soon. Edit. There he is. If I missed something, let me know. There are so many comments. I haven't gone through all the new messages yet, and I'm really sorry I can't reply to everyone. I'm super busy right now, but I hope to catch up with some of you over the weekend. Third update. Oh God, that title is awful. Sorry, I'll come up with something better once my brain starts working again. It's that time of year, you know. Check in on your teacher friends if you have any. Hey everyone, it's been a long time, but I finally logged back into this account. And wow, I don't even know where to start. So much support, so many New Year wishes. It's just incredible. I love the internet sometimes. You were with me when I was at my lowest point. I've gotten dozens of messages asking how I've been, what's new, and even stories from people who went through almost the same thing. One girl said her boyfriend blamed everything on their new puppy. Seriously, she even sent a photo of that little fluff ball. It's crazy how such a painful experience turned out to be so common. Still, I haven't lost faith in humanity, thanks to the wave of love you've all given me. It's been almost 2 years now. It feels like both an eternity ago and just yesterday. All right, to the point. Let's start with the bad news. Kai and I had a pretty big fight. I won't go into every detail, that would take about 30 pages, but long story short, we were roommates. We lived together, shared everything, chores, shopping, daily life. Whenever I went to the store, he knew it. I knew when he got home from work. We were just always aware of each other's schedules because we lived side by side and ran a shared household. At some point, Kai told me he was going on a date. Cool, I was happy for him. I was still deep in the divorce process then, emotionally shattered, not thinking about relationships at all. Kai and Marie, since they never married, broke up a bit easier than I did, but it was still hard. He went on one date, then another, and that was it. A week passed without news, so I asked, what happened? He just said she was ghosting him. Then a week later, out of nowhere, he dropped a bombshell. He was dating Marie. I know, sounds insane, right? But he told me this while sitting on the couch crying like a kid.
and I couldn't even be mad. I just felt sorry for him. It's not easy to recover from broken relationships. He said those dates made him realize that everything between them really was over for good. He described it like this, or close to it. When I first met Marie, she seemed like a sweet, polite girl next door, like a cashier with a kind smile. But as I got to know her, I found out she was fun and free-spirited. That's what I fell for. And when I saw her again recently, it felt like she'd reset to factory settings. That hit him hard, like he'd gone full circle for nothing. After 2 dates, he didn't just ghost her, he blocked her everywhere. It was a bit hard for me to listen to. It reminded me way too much of my own situation, but I tried not to dwell on it and just comforted him. For a few months after that, everything was calm. During that time, Kai turned me into a total gym girl. It's funny rereading my old posts, how skeptical I was about the gym back then. Anyway, after a few peaceful months, Kai had news again. He was going on another date. This time with a friend of a friend. I said the usual, great, go for it. I was still angry at the world, still legally married, so I wasn't thinking about new relationships at all. As I mentioned, Kai and I unintentionally kept tabs on each other because of how we lived. So when he started leaving home at 2 p.m. and returning at 8 p.m., his dates lasting hours, of course I noticed. I didn't say anything. I figured maybe he was just smitten, which made sense. But his absences were pretty noticeable. He even asked me to do little errands for him because he knew he wouldn't have time due to his long outings. Eventually, I met the girl. Her name was Grace. She was in her 20s, very sweet, and also a teacher. She worked in an elementary school, but we still had a lot to talk about. At that point, everything seemed perfect. Kai and Grace were adorable together. Summer went by peacefully, everything felt stable. I had just officially finalized my divorce.
But damn, those dates were endless. Even the short ones lasted 3 or 4 hours. He would just disappear. So I finally decided to bring it up, carefully. Kai said that Grace usually picked the meeting spots herself, places 1 or 2 hours away with traffic. When I asked where Grace actually lived, maybe they were meeting halfway, he calmly said, I don't really know. That's when alarm bells went off in my head. Maybe I've read too many infidelity forums, but something about it felt off. Grace couldn't have lived that far away. She was friends with one of our mutual acquaintances. They've been dating for months. She'd even had dinner at our place more than once. And yet, he didn't know where she lived. And all their meetings happened miles away. Suspicious much? So yeah, I probably crossed a line. I searched her name on Instagram and boom. Grace in a wedding dress with some guy named Mike. The post was from 2019. She was married. I shot up from bed and ran straight to wake Kai up. Yes, I know, total idiot move. It was midnight, he had work at 7 a.m., and there I was, waving my phone in his face like a lunatic. When I finally stopped rambling, Kai exploded. He went from groggy to furious in 2 seconds flat. He started yelling at me for invading his privacy, demanding why the hell I was snooping in his relationship. When I tried to explain my concerns, he got even angrier. Within minutes, it turned into a full-blown shouting match. He accused me of crossing every possible line, which honestly was partially true. But we'd lived together, always knowing what was going on in each other's lives. I asked him why he was mad if I was just worried about him. He fired back that I was obsessed with him, that he'd long felt like our friendship had crossed the line, and that was why I was stalking him. That's when I lost it completely. I said things I regret, brought up Marie, and told him I wouldn't date him for $1 million. He started yelling back, calling me names. It was ugly. Eventually, I stormed out. The next morning, he woke me up before work. I thought he'd cooled off, maybe even come to apologize. But instead, he dropped a bomb. He knew. He'd known Grace was married almost from the start, but didn't care. Apparently, her husband was a good guy, but Grace told Kai she didn't feel anything for him anymore. So, he just went along with it. I was stunned. I asked him how he'd feel if Marie's lovers knew she was engaged and still slept with her. He got defensive again, shouting at me not to bring up Marie. We argued, not as loud as the night before, but still heated. He said that he'd kept it secret because he knew I'd make a scene.
I told him that cheating was a deep wound for me, and I expected it to be the same for him. But he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It's not." Then he added that living with me was already like being in a relationship, and that I had no right to interfere in his personal life. That one really hit hard. I said, "Fine, date whoever you want. I just wanted you to know you're helping someone cheat." He shrugged, said he didn't care, and left for work. I wasn't his mother, I couldn't control him, but I thought he deserved to know he'd become the other man. If I were in his place, I'd want someone to tell me the truth, and if someone told me my partner was cheating, I'd end it instantly. But Kai's moral compass, it seems, worked differently. We kept living together for a bit, but the atmosphere became cold and strained. I lost respect for him. He still saw Grace, and worse, seemed convinced I had feelings for him. Eventually, I packed my things and moved in with a friend. It turned out to be the best decision, even though it was far from work. As for my ex-husband, not long after the divorce was finalized, he got engaged to another woman. Right after I'd moved out, I hit rock bottom. There was chaos at school over AI and student essays. I was trying to build a new life in a place where I knew no one, and the loneliness was eating me alive. I tried a few dates, but they were all so mediocre I gave up, which somehow made the loneliness worse. And just when I thought things couldn't get bleaker, my ex reached out. He told me about his engagement, his new life, and how happy he was. Said he was working on self-improvement and wanted to apologize, in person. He promised it wasn't a date, that he expected nothing from me. I should have said no, but I was emotionally drained, and the idea of closure sounded like relief. So, I agreed.
At first, it was civil. We exchanged small talk. He even gave a genuine apology. But then he started asking questions. How was I doing? Was I seeing anyone? And when he realized I wasn't doing great, that smirk appeared. That same smug Cheshire Cat grin I'd seen before. He started bragging about his new fiancée, about how beautiful she was, about how amazing his life had become. Then he said, "Honestly, our breakup was a blessing in disguise." It felt like a knife in my chest. All those years I'd given him, and he called them a burden? Eventually, I made some excuse and left. I wasn't invited to the wedding, obviously, and I regretted agreeing to meet him at all. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After months of dragging myself through the days, I finally went on another date. That's when I met Chase. 29, bright, kind, a total goofball. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I used to think I needed a brooding, mysterious man to balance my energy. But here's my advice. If you're a sunny person, don't look for someone dark to complete you. Find someone who shines with you. Chase makes me laugh every day. There are no fake conversations, no one-sided love, just two weird, happy people being completely themselves. We joke, we dream, we build new memories, and life finally feels alive again. Now, it's 2025. I've got my own place near work. I even started going back to my old gym. And of course, that's where I saw Kai again. He didn't notice me at first, but when he did, he came right up, apologized sincerely, and said he regretted how things ended. Told me he'd be glad if we could talk again someday. Maybe we will. Maybe not. Honestly, he feels like a character from the first movie who suddenly shows up in the sequel. Someone from a chapter that's long since closed. My life now feels completely different. With Chase, with my own home, with peace and laughter. Well, except for one thing. The Lotion Man. Yes, I finally showed Chase the infamous drawing. My hands were shaking, but I did it. He burst out laughing so hard he cried. Now it's become our little tradition.
We've got the soap man, the ketchup man, the cream man, even the floor man. Don't ask. Everything with a doodled face becomes a character, and each has a ridiculous accent. And honestly, it's perfect. Life moves on. We heal, we grow, we laugh again. And the best part? I've stopped apologizing for who I am. Because if you shine too bright for the box you're in, the problem isn't your light. It's the box. So get out of it. I'll never apologize again for being myself.
My wife betrayed me after 33 years of marriage. After 33 years together, my wife cheated on me. She begged for forgiveness, but I told her to pack her things, and I filed for divorce. We'd been married for over 3 decades. 2 grown children, 2 grandchildren. Our pride and joy. We met back in the 80s at a nightclub where I worked. One date led to another. 2 months later, we moved in together, and 2 years after that, we got married. Life was good. Work, kids, laughter, everything felt solid. As the years went on, my active job turned into a desk one, and I gained a lot of weight. So much that intimacy became difficult. I'd get asthma attacks halfway through. Still, we stayed loyal. I'd been cheated on before, so we both agreed that infidelity was something that could never be forgiven. I truly believed we would grow old together. After 20 years of a mostly dead bedroom, I decided to change. I lost 80 kilograms in 2 years, and even had surgery to remove excess skin. I had 3 reasons. I wanted to live long enough to see my grandkids grow, I wanted to be healthy, and I wanted to bring passion back into our marriage. It worked. For the past 2 years, we were intimate several times a week. She seemed genuinely happy. I could see it in her face, in her body. We were enjoying life again. She told me she loved me every day, and I always told her the same. I never cheated, and I truly believed she didn't either. A few weeks ago, she went on a trip with her 2 sisters to another state. I didn't mind. I trusted her completely. We always had open phones and shared our locations for safety reasons, not out of control. Trust was never an issue. When I lost weight, women started paying attention to me again, but I never acted on it. I was happily married. My wife sometimes said she felt insecure because I had become the attractive one while she'd gained some weight. But I didn't care about that. I loved her in every form. I told her she was beautiful every single day. Then came the call that shattered my life. I was driving home from work when she called, crying hysterically. She asked if her sister had talked to me. I said no. Then she blurted out through sobs that she had cheated on me, that she'd slept with another man. She kept saying she didn't know what came over her, that it was a horrible mistake, that she hated herself. Apparently, she and her sisters had gone drinking. A married couple they met joined them. After the bar closed, her sisters went to bed, and she, drunk, went with that couple to their hotel room to keep drinking. According to her, they complimented her, told her she was sexy and that I was lucky. Then the man started touching her while his wife encouraged it. They told her no one would ever know, just to enjoy it. She claimed it felt like she wasn't even herself, but she still went through with it. She slept with that man while his wife watched. In the morning, she woke up in bed with both of them and ran back to her room. Her sisters saw her leaving and forced her to confess what happened. She told her she had to tell me or she would. That's when my wife called, sobbing and begging me to forgive her. I sat in my car in shock, feeling my heart break apart. 33 years, gone in one night. I hung up and turned off my phone. For 2 days, I shut out the world. I cried for the woman I thought I knew, for the life we'd built, for the future that no longer existed. My entire world had collapsed. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were hundreds of messages from her and her sisters. The last one said she was driving home. Our kids had been trying to reach me too. She had told them she was worried about me. I called my kids and told them the truth. I told them that no matter how angry they felt, she was still their mother and their children's grandmother. That didn't change. Before she came back, I left her a note telling her to pack her things and go stay with her mother. Then I sent her a message, the last one I'll ever send. I told her we're getting divorced. I don't want details. I don't want explanations. She chose this. She chose to destroy everything we had. Now she and everyone else will live with the consequences. Our marriage is over. And to the few people who told me to stay strong, thank you. It means more than you know.
Update 2. To everyone accusing me, you've got your own demons, so good luck dealing with them. This will be my last update for a while. Writing this out has actually made me feel lighter, as if I've finally exhaled after holding my breath for weeks. I talked to my wife yesterday. After so many years together, we'd never been able to sleep without the other next to us, not for decades. But last night, for the first time, I actually slept peacefully without her. She came home looking like hell. Tired, guilty, terrified, and with freshly dyed hair, as if that could somehow change who she was. Normally, my heart would have softened instantly, and I would have rushed to comfort her. Not this time. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in. She burst into tears and tried to hug me, mumbling how sorry she was, how she'd ruined everything. I raised my hand and told her not to touch me, just to sit down. I asked if she wanted coffee. She nodded. I poured 2 mugs and sat back down. She kept staring at me like a frightened child. When she started to speak, I stopped her, told her to just listen and answer when asked. I said, "This is over. You made your choice, now I'm making mine." I'd already decided, but I wanted to hear some truth from her before it all ended. I told her I had spoken to her sister, and even to the other couple, a lie. I wanted to see how she'd react. Inside, I felt strange, sad, angry, disappointed, but calm. That calmness scared her more than anything. I asked how many times. She said it was physical only once, but twice more over video calls. She explained how it started with flirty work chats that got out of hand. Eventually, the man's wife joined in, and after a few months, they started doing explicit video calls. My wife admitted she'd always fantasized about being watched by another woman, and they were more than happy to make that happen. She cried while saying it, repeating that it all went too far, that she knew it was wrong, and that the danger of it made it even more exciting. I stopped her mid-sentence. I didn't want to hear excuses. After a long silence, she finally admitted that when she met them on that trip, it was planned all along. I asked if she'd ever intended to tell me. She said, "No, it was just something I wanted to experience once and forget about forever." I told her that was complete garbage, that cheating once or 1,000 times didn't matter. The result was the same. I said the only people she'd hurt now were our children and grandchildren if she kept lying. Then I told her straight. I didn't believe a word of what she said, and it didn't even matter anymore. That's when she realized I wasn't going to work on the marriage. She started begging me to stay, promising to do anything, even said she'd let me sleep with other women if that's what it took. She kept crying that it would never happen again. I told her to stop, that she'd already humiliated herself enough. I said if I ever slept with another woman, that would mean the marriage was already over, and it was. When she reached for my hand, I pulled back. I told her I would never touch her again. Not out of cruelty, but because the woman I married no longer existed. She died the night she chose to betray me, and worse, when she planned it. All the beautiful memories, our first house, raising our kids, laughing together, are now just that, memories. I told her we'd sell the house and business, split everything evenly. She could keep the car, I'd take the truck and the motorcycle. She could even take the cats. Then I made it clear, no calls, no texts, no contact unless it's about the kids or grandkids.
I'll handle everything through the lawyers. She started crying again, saying I was cold and emotionless. I told her, no, I was just honest. Her choices left nothing inside me but emptiness. She destroyed everything I loved. After that, I left her alone to pack her things. I went to my daughter's house, played with my granddaughter, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. When I came back home, my wife was gone. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Update 3. It's been 5 insane weeks since my soon-to-be ex-wife threw our marriage in the trash. I've had plenty of time to think, and I still know I made the right choice. I could never trust her again. The thought of touching me makes me sick. She made the decision to cheat, thinking she'd get away with it. She didn't. She's still living with her mother. I've been getting the house ready to sell. We lived here for 20 years, so there was a lot of stuff to clear out, but it's done. The house is on the market, and we already have a couple of interested buyers. The business was sold last week to one of our longtime clients. People say divorce is tough, but until you're in it, you don't realize how draining it really is. Legally, we have to live separately for a full year and 1 day before filing, then another few months before it becomes official. Only after that can the property division be finalized. By the time that happens, I intend to have nothing left tying me to her. Once she signs the last paper, I'll finally be free to move forward. Her mindset, however, is a whole different story.
Update 4. My son only spoke to her once, and judging by how it went, it wasn't a pleasant conversation. Just so it's clear, my kids are adults with their own families. I told him that time would heal things, that despite everything, she's still his mother, and she was a good one. I don't want her actions to destroy their bond. My daughter, on the other hand, still keeps in touch with her. She's ashamed of what her mother did, but is helping her cope with the divorce. My daughter has always been straightforward. She doesn't sugarcoat anything and makes it clear how badly her mother screwed up. As for my soon-to-be ex-wife, she lives in complete denial. She truly believes that I'll eventually calm down and forgive her. She thinks that all the years we shared will make me reconsider. When she came over to sign the papers for the house sale, she said I'd changed my mind, that I still loved her, that once I realized everything, she'd become the best wife, and that we'd still grow old together. She said this was just a bump in the road. I was stunned. I looked at her and told her she was delusional. She lied, cheated, and betrayed me in the most disgusting way. She let another man inside her while his wife watched. How could she ever believe I'd want to touch her again? She started crying, saying she knew she shouldn't have done it, that she didn't even know what she was doing, that it wasn't even that good. I told her to shut up. I didn't care whether it was good or bad. That wasn't the point. The point was, she still did it. I told her there's absolutely zero chance of reconciliation. I want nothing to do with her anymore. I can't wait to finally start living a life that doesn't include her. She's living in denial, pretending she still has some kind of hold over me, but she doesn't. She lost that right the moment she destroyed our marriage with lies and infidelity. This entire situation is the result of her choices. She knew what she was risking before she did it, so she doesn't get to act naive now. Funny thing, lately I've been getting a lot of attention from other women. I'm not looking for a relationship right now, but it's nice to know I have options if I ever decide to. When my ex found out that some female friends had stopped by to bring me dinner or just chat, she got jealous. She said I should let off some steam and that she'd be waiting for me when I was done. God, how naive can she be? I'm still full of emotions: anger, hate, disgust, loss, sadness. But I'm a strong man. I'll get through this. My main goal now is to cut off all financial ties with her and finally move on. 3 months later, final update. It's been 3 months. The divorce process is still ongoing, but most of the hard work is already done. The business has been sold, the house too, and legally we're living apart. I just have to wait out the required period before the divorce is finalized. Everything we owned has been split evenly.
I bought 2 small apartments near my grandkids, one for me to live in and another I rent out. My son and daughter live in different states with their families, so this way I can visit them whenever I want to. I'm working again. A former competitor offered me a part-time position and I took it. It gives me plenty of free time to actually enjoy life again. A few weeks ago, I just got on my motorcycle and rode without a destination, stopped for coffee, watched people, took in the world around me. In the evenings, I'd stop by a pub, have a couple of beers, then ride off again the next day. And honestly, I'm surprised by how easy it feels to talk to women again. I've slept with a couple, nothing serious, no emotions, just fun and physical connection. And I feel free. Some people have asked me if I ever reached out to the couple she cheated with. No, and I never will. It wasn't their decision, it was hers. They mean nothing to me. The best revenge on a cheater is indifference, moving on and living well. Sure, the memories still come back sometimes, but they no longer break me. My ex, though, still lives in a fantasy world. She honestly believes that when I get tired of being alone, I'll take her back. I've made it clear, our marriage is over, forever. I told her I don't care what she does or who she's with now, just like she no longer has any right to care about what I do. My daughter told me her mother is still in denial, ashamed and broken. She's even asked our daughter to convince me to come back. I said that will never happen. She's not ashamed of what she did. She's ashamed she got caught and that I actually walked away instead of forgiving her. Life isn't what I expected, but for the first time in years, I'm genuinely looking forward to the future.
I nearly lost $900,000 during my divorce, but instead, I destroyed my cheating wife in court with shocking evidence. I work as an elementary school teacher, so my daily routine is very predictable. I have fixed hours at school, and every Tuesday we usually had staff meetings that ended around 6 p.m. That meant I normally got home by 7. My wife, Terry, whom I had been married to for over 30 years, would go to the gym every Tuesday evening. She always came back exhausted, so I usually prepared dinner while she showered and handled the house chores. But one day, my principal surprised us by canceling the meeting. It was only 3:30 p.m., and I thought it would be a great idea to head home early, cook dinner, and maybe catch up on some household tasks. Lately, I'd noticed Terry becoming more distant, and I hoped a candlelit dinner might help rekindle some spark between us. Our marriage had been strained by financial troubles, and I could feel her pulling away more and more. She wanted to control everything, and if things didn't go her way, she would become stubborn and irritable. I always thought of myself as patient, but it was starting to wear me down. When I got home, I noticed her car in the garage. That was strange because she usually took the bus to the gym. I slipped in quietly through the back door. The first thing I saw was her purse sitting on the kitchen counter. Terry was always meticulous about where she placed her things, so this was odd. Then I noticed her workout clothes and a large towel on the floor. Just as confusion set in, I heard noises coming upstairs. My first thought was that she might not be feeling well, so I cautiously started up the stairs. That's when I stumbled over a pair of men's shoes. Scattered on the steps were pants, a shirt, socks, and worst of all, Terry's lingerie, the kind she only wore for anniversaries or special nights. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs, heart pounding, stomach turning. For a moment, I might faint. I sat down, trembling. Then anger began to boil inside me, an emotion I rarely allowed to take control. Years of teaching had given me patience, but this was beyond anything I could manage. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. To reach it, you had to pass through the walk-in closet. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And there it was, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the mother of our children, betraying me in our own bed. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I knew I would need proof, not just for myself, but for the storm that was about to follow. Watching it unfold before my eyes was like living through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Terry, The woman who claimed to love me, who volunteered at charities, who acted like the perfect wife, was now just another liar. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped recording, slipped out of the house, and just walked aimlessly. Eventually, I ended up in a park miles away. I sat on a bench, splashed some water on my face, and played the video back. The sound was low so nearby kids wouldn't hear, but on that screen was the collapse of my marriage, my family, my entire life. And there in the park, I broke down and cried. By the time I got back home, it was around 7 p.m., my usual return time on meeting days. Terry greeted me at the back door with fake concern. "Honey, are you okay? You look so pale. What happened? Do you want me to get you something to drink?" Her eyes were full of feigned worry, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. My voice shook as I muttered, "Not really. I think it's just my stomach. I'm going to take a shower and sleep it off." "All right, but take a bucket in case you throw up. I don't want to ruin the clean sheets," she said casually. That almost broke me. Those clean sheets had already been ruined, stained by the trail. I replied more firmly, "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And that's exactly what I did. For the next few days, I pretended to be unwell. She went on with life as if nothing had happened, while I carried the weight of the recording in my pocket, the evidence that my marriage was nothing but ashes. When Monday came, I finally decided what to do next. I needed answers. Was this just a one-time betrayal, or had it been going on for a while? The next morning, I told the school principal that I had to undergo an unexpected medical procedure and wouldn't be able to teach for a few days. A substitute was arranged, which gave me the freedom I needed. On Tuesday, I left home as usual, but parked several streets away, then walked back quietly, cutting through neighbors' yards. I knew all the back routes and moved carefully so no one would notice me. I slipped into our detached garage and changed into casual clothes and soft shoes to keep silent. Then came the waiting. I remembered that the last time I'd come home early, there hadn't been any strange cars parked outside. That meant her lover probably came on foot. I crouched behind the hedge and bushes near our front entrance, hidden but with a clear view of the door. Terry carried on her morning as if everything was normal. Washing dishes, starting the dishwasher, vacuuming, dusting. Around 11:30, she went upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by the toilet flushing. After about 45 minutes, she came back down and left the front door slightly open, an unspoken invitation for her guest. It didn't take long. Around 1:30, he showed up. I didn't know who he was at first, but I managed to capture about 10 seconds of video on my phone. It showed his side profile and almost a clear shot of his face. He didn't hesitate. He just walked straight into my house. The first words I heard froze me in place. "I hope you're wearing that workout outfit again." "Of course," Terry replied with a giggle. "You always loved when I put it on. Sometimes I think that's what hooked you in the first place." That was all I needed. Their comfort with each other screamed of a long-term affair. They headed upstairs without a care in the world. I returned to the garage, my heart pounding out of my chest. My head was spinning with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why hadn't she ever talked to me about anything? What terrified me more was the thought of my health. They hadn't used protection, at least not that I could see. The idea that she might have put me at risk made my stomach churn. I thought back to her years at the gym, the social circle of married women she had joined, and the charity events. Maybe the gym held the answers.
Update 1. Being a teacher came with one big advantage. I had access to printers and other resources. I decided to start by printing still frames from the video I had taken. Identifying him was now my top priority. On Thursday, when Terry was supposed to go to the gym again, I suggested going with her. I claimed I was thinking about getting a membership myself, especially since school was on break. She immediately grew uncomfortable and tried to talk me out of it. "It's really just a group of wives who chat more than work out," she insisted. But I didn't budge. So that Thursday, I walked into the gym with her. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a scene from an old Western. Everyone turned to stare at me, whispering among themselves. Terry was visibly on edge, sneaking nervous glances toward the staff area. I tried to distract myself by walking around the facility. It was the usual setup, rows of machines, mirrors on the walls. Near the exit, I noticed a staff board with photos and contact info. At the top was the owner and director, Ms. Elizabeth West, followed by 2 women and 1 man. My blood went cold. The man was him, the lover. Under his photo, Philip Barnes, head of training programs, personal coach. As I memorized his number, I looked back toward the machines. Terry was gone. Panic struck me until I spotted her a few minutes later in a hushed but desperate conversation with none other than Philip. She stood partly hidden behind weight equipment, gesturing for him to leave. Then she quickly returned to her machine as if nothing had happened. She didn't realize I'd seen it all. I sat there, burning with rage, trying to keep my composure. When she came back over, she noticed my pale face and asked softly, "Are you okay? Is your blood sugar still low?" "I'm fine now. Are you ready to leave?" Before she could answer, the director's voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the last training session of the day is canceled. Mr. Barnes suddenly felt unwell and had to go home." A wave of disappointment swept through the women in the gym. But I wasn't disappointed. For me, it only confirmed everything. Update 2. It seemed that workouts with Mr. Bont were a cornerstone for many women at that gym. That alone made me think this needed deeper investigation. When I glanced at Terry, she didn't show much reaction to the announcement of his sudden illness, but I could swear I saw her shoulders relax, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "Let's go," she said quickly, snatching her towel and gym bag from the storage area where everyone left their things during class. We were just stepping out when a woman approached us, someone I didn't immediately recognize. "Such a shame we couldn't finish today's session properly," she commented to Terry. Terry gave a brief "agreed" and headed toward the car, clearly signaling that she had no interest in chatting further. "See you later," she tossed over her shoulder before sliding into the car faster than I'd ever seen her move. The ride home was silent. Terry leaned her head back, closed her eyes, and deliberately slowed her breathing as though calming herself. She looked serene, almost too serene, and I couldn't help but think maybe I could use this relaxed moment to probe deeper. "That was a pretty interesting workout, dear. The place is really well equipped. No wonder you've stayed so toned all these years." "Thanks, honey," she replied softly. "You're absolutely right. The program's great, and I enjoy being there. The women are friendly, too. Too bad Mr. Bont wasn't around today." She caught herself too quickly, correcting, Philip Bont. "He usually finishes every session with those tough exercises that really push us to the limit. It's always disappointing when he's not around." Inside, my stomach twisted. I knew all too well how far he had been pushing her body, but outwardly I only muttered, maybe he'll be better by next Thursday. The thought of their next intimate encounter made me sick, but I shoved it down. The following week, I had playground duty at school during pickup time. For those unfamiliar, it's chaos. Kids rushing out, chatting with friends, scanning for parents, while we teachers try to keep order until each child is collected. Near the end of pickup, a car pulled up, and I instantly recognized the driver. It was the same woman who had tried speaking to Terry in the gym.
"Hello," she said nervously. "Sorry, I'm new to all this and lost track of the time. My son Timothy's here, right?" That wasn't unusual. New parents often struggled with pickup procedures. I reassured her I'd get Timothy, while colleagues covered the remaining kids. I found him near his classroom, chatting with another student. "Hey Tim, your mom's here. Let's head to the pickup area." He looked puzzled. He was in the last year of elementary school, old enough to not lose track of time. "That's weird," he muttered. "Mom's usually busy with her fitness instructor on Friday afternoons. Back at my old school, she often didn't come until 5:30. The word fitness instructor hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded as I casually asked, "Oh, that's great she takes care of her health. Do you happen to know his name?" "Yeah, it's Bont or something like that. He works at the local gym but also does private lessons at home. That's who I want to be when I grow up. Mom always seems so happy and relaxed after training with him. We usually order takeout on Fridays because she doesn't have time to cook." I nearly lost my composure. This man wasn't just entangled with my wife, he was messing around with multiple women in town. Back at the car, his mother thanked me warmly for helping. "Not a problem," I said smoothly. "Part of the job. By the way, I don't think we've officially met. I'm Gerard D. Kids just call me Mr. D. Nice."
Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day hysterical and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. And just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. When I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together.
Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming, but slowly I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music, since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie.
The entitled lady at Starbucks. A woman with an inflated ego decided that using mobile orders was unfair and demanded that I wait in line, even though my drink was already paid for and ready. I'm 28. There's a Starbucks conveniently located near my therapist's office, and over the past few months, I've gotten into the habit of grabbing a sugary drink before each session. Don't judge me, I know those 400-calorie, whipped cream-topped sugar bombs aren't real coffee. But that overpriced $10 liquid dessert is my small comfort before diving into emotional self-improvement. Yesterday morning, on my way to therapy, I made a rare smart decision. I ordered ahead through the app to avoid the lunchtime rush. Perfect timing. 10 minutes later, I walked in just as the barista was finishing my pumpkin spice cold brew. She called my name, and I happily stepped forward to grab it. But before I could pick it up, a manicured hand gently landed on my forearm. The hand belonged to a woman who looked about 35, polished, confident, wrapped in a flawless linen suit. Her sleek ponytail, gold jewelry, and designer bag practically screamed, "I'm important." She exuded that unmistakable aura of superiority, chin slightly raised, posture perfect, as if she believed the air around her was more refined than everyone else's. For simplicity, let's call her Miss Entitlement. Her smile looked polite, but her tone was sugary sweet and condescending, like a teacher correcting a clueless child. "That's not yours," she said softly. I frowned, confused. I checked the cup. My name was written right there. "Oh, sorry. Do you have the same name? I think this one's mine. What did you order?" She shook her head, the smile tightening. "No, my name's much longer than that. I ordered a hot soy matcha with 2 pumps of vanilla." "Ah, then this definitely isn't yours," I said. "This one's a pumpkin spice cold brew. Maybe yours is still coming out. You could ask the barista." I reached for my cup again, but her manicured claws tightened around my arm. Her mask slipped, and that fake smile cracked. "I didn't say it was mine. I said it's not yours. I saw you walk in and grab the first drink you saw. You can't do that. You need to wait in line like everyone else." It finally clicked. "Oh, I ordered through the app," I explained. "It's prepaid and ready for pickup. See? I pulled up my confirmation email on my phone and showed her. Order placed 12 minutes ago, paid in full." She barely glanced at it before smacking my hand away, hard enough to leave a red mark. "You can't just walk in and take it," she hissed. "I don't care if it's your drink. It's not fair to everyone else who's waiting." I stood there, stunned. Did this stranger just hit me over a Starbucks order? Around us, maybe 8 people were waiting for their drinks, with another dozen still in line. She honestly thought I should wait behind all of them just to satisfy her warped sense of fairness? I locked eyes with the barista, who looked exhausted, the kind of weary look only years of customer service trauma can create. She sighed and approached us cautiously. "Hi, is there a problem here?" Before I could answer, Miss Entitlement jumped in. "Yes, this girl just walked in, grabbed a random drink and won't wait her turn. Tell her to get back in line." I held up my phone. "That's not true. This is my drink. I ordered it through the app. Here's the confirmation, and the name matches the cup. Look." The barista double-checked my phone, glanced at the label, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, this order is hers. She paid in advance." The entitled woman's jaw tightened. "I don't care if she paid. I've been waiting here like everyone else. She doesn't get special treatment." The barista's tone stayed calm but firm. Her order came through the mobile system earlier, so it was prepared in order of receipt. You're welcome to use the app next time to skip the line, but you can't stop other customers from collecting their drinks or use physical force. Please step aside or I'll have to ask you to leave. Miss Entitlement's face flushed crimson. "No, I want my drink, and she can wait like everyone else. Make my matcha first. I don't care if hers is done." I sighed. "I'm actually running late for an appointment, so can I just take my drink and go? Also, she hit me. There's a red mark on my arm. Maybe call security?" The barista nodded. "Yeah, I think that's best." Up until that moment, Miss Entitlement hadn't raised her voice. She'd been calmly dripping venom with that infuriatingly patronizing tone, like she thought we'd all eventually come to our senses and realize she was right. But when the barista finally handed me my drink, her composure shattered. Her face twisted with pure rage as she turned on the poor employee. "This is ridiculous. Your system is broken. Do you have any idea who I am? You'll regret this. Get your manager now." And that, my friends, is how I got smacked in the hand by a Starbucks Karen because she doesn't understand how mobile orders work. I didn't do anything wrong. I paid for my drink and I'm not going anywhere. I'll sit here and enjoy it. I have every legal right to do so, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. While the demon continued her tantrum, I glanced at the unflappable barista. She blinked heavily, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry. But then I realized this battle-hardened warrior was simply restraining the urge to roll her eyes. She met my gaze and gave a subtle nod toward the door. After years of surviving the front lines of customer service hell, she could handle this herself. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, letting me pass toward the exit. Just as I reached the door, Beelzebub, the elegant woman, realized her prey was escaping and screeched, "Hey, where do you think you're going? She can't just leave. Someone stop her. I said she has to wait her turn like everyone else." I raised a single finger in her direction and slipped out the back door just as the bell above the entrance jingled. A security guard had arrived. Beelzebub's righteous tirade immediately shifted gears. Now she was shouting that she had every right to be there, that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she refused to be kicked out. She demanded her money back, a free matcha, and a formal apology, right now. Each sentence was punctuated by the sound of her slapping the counter.
Her indignant screeching slowly faded behind the closing door as I walked away, holding my well-earned cold brew like a trophy. I like to imagine the guard didn't have to physically throw her out, though honestly, knowing her, she probably regained her composure, lifted her chin, and swept out like an insulted duchess, muttering something about her lawyer. As I sipped that heavenly pumpkin-spiced madness, I pictured a lonely venti soy matcha latte, extra hot, 2 pumps of vanilla, slowly cooling on the counter. And somewhere a decaffeinated Beelzebub was probably raging in her fancy office. That thought made every sip taste even sweeter. Wow, I didn't expect so many people to actually read this all the way through. I figured I'd take a minute to answer a few common questions that keep popping up in the comments. Yes, I'm Australian, and yes, this really happened here. About the infamous pumpkin-flavored monstrosity, I fully admit I have the world's worst taste in coffee, but drinking something that tastes like a scented candle has always been a weird little dream of mine. And you know what? Shockingly good. Props to America for that one. To those asking why I didn't stand up for myself, I'm a lover, not a fighter, meaning I literally can't fight. If I tried to punch her, I'd probably hurt my own hand more than her face. Plus, I didn't want to get banned from the only Starbucks I ever go to, or, get charged with assault. Why didn't I call the police? I was already late for therapy, and I didn't want to spend hours giving a statement. She didn't really hit me, more like a slap on the wrist that left a red mark for a while. No bruise, nothing worth reporting. Should I have thrown my drink on her? Absolutely not. I'd rather calmly sip my $9 coffee milkshake in peace. Besides, if I'd made a mess, the poor employees would have had to clean it, not her. Oh, and shout out to the guy who literally made a fake account just to send me a death threat because he didn't like my tone and thinks I'm a stuck-up witch. Honestly, kind of flattering. That's a lot of effort for one hate message. If you're reading this, send me your name and address. I promise I won't forward it to the cops. And finally, to everyone who made it this far, thank you. It's nice knowing someone actually reads this stuff. This was fun to write, but it's now 4 a.m. and I'm about to crash. Let's see what chaos tomorrow brings. Before we move on to the next story, I've got a question for you. What would you do in this situation? Actually, it reminded me of something that happened to me recently. It's kind of similar. I'd ordered a shawarma through an app, got a notification that it was ready, but when I arrived, I had no idea where to pick it up. The girl behind the counter was serving someone else, totally silent, and I just stood there waiting, confused. I finally asked, "Hey, can I pick up my shawarma?" And she just didn't answer. Awkward silence. I waited until she finished with the customer, asked again, and she finally handed it to me. I said, "You could have just said something." And she replied, "Can't you see I'm serving someone?" Like, what? I was new there, didn't know how pickup worked, and she couldn't spare 2 words to clarify? Some people just really hate being mildly helpful. Anyway, what do you think? Was she totally right to ignore me? Or was that just bad customer service? Curious to hear your thoughts, because like in the Starbucks story, sometimes these wait-your-turn situations aren't as black and white as they seem.
I am 48 years old. I have known Pat for a very long time. She is about the same age as me. As far back as I can remember, even when we were young, she was obsessed with the dream of having 5 children and living the perfect family life in a house with a white picket fence. In college, I gradually stopped communicating with her. Over time, it became clear that she was a person without principles. She was manipulative, pushy, and constantly tried to make people feel sorry for her. Her behavior often seemed both unpleasant and ridiculous at the same time. I lived my life peacefully and barely thought about her for many years, but one day, Pat found me on Facebook. Out of politeness, I accepted her friend request. It turned out that she had become the mother of 5 children and was raising them with a completely permissive parenting style. The kids did whatever they wanted, and she never stopped them. Moreover, she forced her daughters to call me aunt. Pat tried to send her children to my house without warning, constantly called me, tried to occupy all my time,
and even began showing up at my workplace. I tried to set boundaries, but she constantly found ways to get around them. My husband and I organized small gatherings for new people in our community. In fact, it was a support initiative. We helped homeless people and those who had found themselves in difficult circumstances. Our community's base was located on a farm that belonged to an elderly couple. There was a large barn, a nice open area, and a green meadow with a small artificial lake. Sometimes weddings were held there. Pat began showing up actively at our gatherings. She never missed an event and tried to take part in all the organizational matters, but her children behaved terribly. During one party, they even ended up in my bedroom, even though there was a separate entertainment area for children. We had to watch them the whole time, so my husband and I couldn't even properly enjoy our own party. A few days later, Pat called me and tried to talk about her children's behavior, but she interrupted me and started talking only about herself. In the end, she announced that her children wanted to come over again and use our pool. I simply stayed silent. Soon afterward, her middle daughter called me and said that her mother had allowed her to spend the entire summer at our house. I had to explain to the child that it wasn't true. Over time, more and more disturbing stories about Pat began to appear. On social media, people complained that she would ask them to watch her children for a couple of hours, but then leave them there for the entire day. Others wrote that she borrowed money and never paid it back. Once, she volunteered to help wrap Christmas gifts for children from low-income families. After that, several nice toys disappeared. Later, they accidentally appeared under her own Christmas tree. There was also an incident at Casey's birthday party. My daughter went there for the celebration, but in the evening she called me in tears. She was ignored the entire time because she hadn't brought Casey the expensive gift that Casey had essentially demanded. When I arrived to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone inside the house while everyone else was having fun outside. Later, the situation became even worse. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandmother's antique ring. It wasn't expensive, but it had great sentimental value for our family. A few days later, I noticed that my daughter had become quiet and withdrawn. She didn't want to go to school, but she wouldn't explain why. Later, her friend told the truth. Pat's eldest daughter, Casey, asked to try on the ring and simply never returned it. Then she said she had accidentally lost the jewelry. In reality, she wore it to school and even spread rumors that my daughter had supposedly tried to steal the ring. When I learned the truth, I was furious. After school, I approached Pat's car and asked Casey to show me her hand. She tried to hide the ring, but I simply took it off her finger. On the inside, there was an engraving with my grandmother's maiden name. Pat started screaming and claimed that my daughter had given the ring to her daughter herself. Then she said they had actually bought it, but it was obvious that it was a lie. Later, Pat called me and began accusing me of humiliating her daughter and destroying her confidence. I never heard an apology. Her husband, Hank, was a completely different person. He worked several jobs to support the family and always looked exhausted. Pat pressured him, manipulated him, and demanded that he have more children with her. Over time, it became clear that he was in a deep depression. In our community, there was a woman named Lena who organized a program to help brides. She collected donated wedding dresses and gave them to women who couldn't afford to buy a new one. One day, Pat decided to renew her wedding vows with her husband and hold a new wedding ceremony. She literally pushed another couple out of their reserved date at the farm, insisting that her celebration had to take place on that exact day. Then she fell in love with one particular dress that had already been reserved for another bride. Eventually, Pat simply switched the packages and sent that girl a different dress. When she was exposed, she claimed that it was her dress. After that, Lena banned her from even entering the dress storage. But a few weeks before the ceremony, Lena accidentally discovered that Pat had still kept that exact dress for herself. That evening, Lena and I secretly went into the room where it was hanging. Lena took out a pair of scissors and simply cut out the entire back part of the dress. Then she carefully hung it back inside the garment bag. The next morning, Pat called me in hysterics. She was crying and saying her dress was ruined. She even asked to borrow my wedding dress. I refused. In the end, Lena brought her an old, huge, and very strange dress from the storage collection. Pat was furious, but she had no other choice. At the ceremony, she looked absolutely miserable. The dress was far too big, wrinkled, and strange. She kept holding it up with her hand so she wouldn't step on the hem. There were very few guests. People had simply grown tired of her behavior. After that incident, Pat changed a lot. She became quieter and started avoiding everyone. Soon, her husband Hank sought help from a psychologist. Gradually, he began to look much calmer and eventually moved out to live with his parents. After some time, he filed for divorce. Pat slowly distanced herself from our community, removed many acquaintances from her social media, and almost stopped appearing at gatherings.
I am 48 years old. I have known Pat for a very long time. She is about the same age as me. As far back as I can remember, even when we were young, she was obsessed with the dream of having 5 children and living the perfect family life in a house with a white picket fence. In college, I gradually stopped communicating with her. Over time, it became clear that she was a person without principles. She was manipulative, pushy, and constantly tried to make people feel sorry for her. Her behavior often seemed both unpleasant and ridiculous at the same time. I lived my life peacefully and barely thought about her for many years, but one day Pat found me on Facebook. Out of politeness, I accepted her friend request. It turned out that she had become the mother of 5 children and was raising them with a completely permissive parenting style. The kids did whatever they wanted, and she never stopped them. Moreover, she forced her daughters to call me aunt. Pat tried to send her children to my house without warning, constantly called me, tried to occupy all my time, and even began showing up at my workplace. I tried to set boundaries, but she constantly found ways to get around them. My husband and I organized small gatherings for new people in our community. In fact, it was a support initiative. We helped homeless people and those who had found themselves in difficult circumstances. Our community's base was located on a farm that belonged to an elderly couple. There was a large barn, a nice open area, and a green meadow with a small artificial lake. Sometimes weddings were held there. Pat began showing up actively at our gatherings. She never missed an event and tried to take part in all the organizational matters, but her children behaved terribly. During one party, they even ended up in my bedroom, even though there was a separate entertainment area for children. We had to watch them the whole time, so my husband and I couldn't even properly enjoy our own party. A few days later, Pat called me and tried to talk about her children's behavior, but she interrupted me and started talking only about herself. In the end, she announced that her children wanted to come over again and use our pool. I simply stayed silent. Soon afterward, her middle daughter called me and said that her mother had allowed her to spend the entire summer at our house. I had to explain to the child that it wasn't true. Over time, more and more disturbing stories about Pat began to appear. On social media, people complained that she would ask them to watch her children for a couple of hours, but then leave them there for the entire day. Others wrote that she borrowed money and never paid it back. Once, she volunteered to help wrap Christmas gifts for children from low-income families. After that, several nice toys disappeared. Later, they accidentally appeared under her own Christmas tree. There was also an incident at Casey's birthday party. My daughter went there for the celebration, but in the evening she called me in tears. She was ignored the entire time because she hadn't brought Casey the expensive gift that Casey had essentially demanded. When I arrived to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone inside the house while everyone else was having fun outside. Later, the situation became even worse. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandmother's antique ring. It wasn't expensive, but it had great sentimental value for our family. A few days later, I noticed that my daughter had become quiet and withdrawn. She didn't want to go to school, but she wouldn't explain why. Later, her friend told the truth. Pat's eldest daughter, Casey, asked to try on the ring and simply never returned it. Then she said she had accidentally lost the jewelry. In reality, she wore it to school and even spread rumors that my daughter had supposedly tried to steal the ring. When I learned the truth, I was furious.
Many years ago, my wife's grandfather found an unusual bag of seeds in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri. The discovery was made near Roaring River Park in the southwestern part of the state. The bag was lying on top of a hill and looked remarkably well preserved. Although it had likely been exposed to the elements for a long time, there were no visible signs of damage or stains. The material proved to be strong and flexible. When at rest, the bag looked slightly wrinkled, but it could still be opened and closed. Out of caution, the find was barely touched, limited to just a few photographs. Inside, there were several hundred seeds of at least 2 different species. Such discoveries are extremely rare. Only one similar artifact is known, a bag of seeds kept at the University of Arkansas. It also contains seeds of ancient plants, ancestors of which still grow in this region today. Interestingly, both bags were found approximately 80 kilometers apart. Later, the owners contacted the university and arranged to transfer the find for research. Over time, more details about the artifact's origin came to light. In fact, the bag had been discovered back in the mid-1960s by 2 men, Jerry Weber and Andy Jewell. Andy had worked for many years as a surveyor for the railroad, farmed, and spent most of his life outdoors. After the discovery, the bag was placed in a glass jar where it remained for about 65 years. Over time, some of the information about the circumstances of the find was lost as Andy Jewell passed away in the early 2000s. Later, relatives were able to recover some details. It turned out the bag was not found simply in the open, but on a rock ledge inside a small grotto on the hillside. In the same area, Andy had found other ancient items, stone tools, and arrowheads. All of these discoveries were kept together for many years. It is likely that the find site was located in Berry County, near Roaring River Park. Andy lived in the Dry Hollow area between the towns of Cassville and Seligman, and the bag may have been found near the Washburn Prairie. Pinpointing the exact location is difficult now, as most people directly involved in the story have passed away. Gathering all the available information and the old artifacts, the family decided to show the find to experts and brought it to the University of Arkansas Museum. The bag was placed in a special storage room in the museum collection, a controlled environment where archaeological artifacts are preserved. The museum curator, Dr. Mary Suter, carefully laid out the bag, seeds, and stone tools for inspection. After the initial examination, she retrieved a scientific book about woven artifacts found in rock shelters of the Ozark Mountains. As she flipped through the pages, she came across an illustration of a bag that matched almost perfectly in weave, color, and construction with the new find. The news quickly spread among museum staff, and other specialists began arriving in the room. Many noted that such artifacts are extremely rare. Archaeologists explained that rock grottos and natural shelters were often used by the region's ancient inhabitants to store items and supplies. These are precisely the kinds of locations where organic materials, which normally decompose quickly, might sometimes survive. According to preliminary assessments, the bag belongs to the pre-contact period, the time before Europeans arrived in North America. Its exact age is still unknown, but it can be confidently stated that it is at least 500 years old and likely much older. To determine a more precise age, radiocarbon dating will be needed. Since the artifact is linked to the cultural heritage of native peoples, the museum must coordinate with the Osage tribe before conducting research. Afterward, samples can be sent to another university for laboratory analysis. For now, the bag, seeds, and other items remain at the University of Arkansas Museum, where they are being preserved under appropriate conditions and studied by archaeologists. Seed bags like this are considered exceptionally rare finds. Before this discovery, archaeologists knew of only 2 similar bags, from Eden Bluff and another heavily damaged one that contained acorns. Organic materials, such as plant fibers and seeds, usually decompose quickly,
so their preservation over hundreds or even thousands of years is highly unusual. Museum specialists immediately began photographing the seeds and stone items to share with other researchers. One of the small black seeds initially puzzled the scientists, but after discussion, they concluded that all of the seeds are very old and no longer viable for germination. Along with the bag, the family also donated several stone tools and arrowheads that Andy Jewell had found. Archaeologist Jared Piard, who specializes in ancient stone implements, quickly determined that these items belong to two different archaeological periods. Some date back to the Middle Archaic period, roughly 2000 to 5000 BCE, and others are from the Woodland Culture period, spanning approximately the first millennium BCE to the first millennium AD. However, these finds can only indirectly help in dating the bag, since it's unclear which of these items were originally found with it. After the preliminary inspection, Dr. Mary Suter decided to show another similar artifact from the museum collection. She led the guests deeper into the storage area, which houses thousands of archaeological artifacts. Among the many shelves with cataloged boxes, she found a collection from excavations conducted in 1932. The box contained various ancient items, shells, bones, fragments of cords, and other objects. Among them was a bag that proved to be almost identical in weave, color, and construction with the new find. It was a little larger, but far more deteriorated. The material was heavily damaged and bound with a piece of leather. Inside, the excavation had uncovered only half of an old carved pipe. Interestingly, this bag was also found in Barry County, Missouri, just a few kilometers from the location where Andy Jewell found his find. Unfortunately, the 1932 artifact has never been radiocarbon dated, so its precise age remains unknown. Next, the researchers showed another famous specimen, the renowned Eden Bluff seed bag. It is approximately 2,000 years old, but is so well preserved that it appears almost new. Examining the museum collection, you could see a vast number of archaeological finds associated with the ancient inhabitants of the Ozarks. The storage houses ceramics, tools, jewelry, and other items that help researchers reconstruct the history of the region. After all the research, the family decided to formally donate the discovered bag to the University of Arkansas Museum. The artifact was formally handed over to the Osage tribe, considered the custodian of many cultural treasures of the region's native peoples. The museum itself is responsible for preserving and scientifically studying such artifacts. The bag was placed in a specialized storage unit with stable temperature and humidity. Under these conditions, the artifact can be preserved for decades and remain accessible for research. The family had long worried whether they could properly preserve such an ancient and valuable item. In the museum, it is now under expert supervision, ensuring not only proper storage conditions, but also continued scientific study. Researchers emphasize that archaeological artifacts are of immense importance for understanding history. That is why, when such items are found, it is recommended to leave them in place and notify specialists who can properly document and study the discovery. The story of this bag ended positively. It is now in a secure location where scientists can study it, and the find will help provide a better understanding of the lives of people who lived in this region centuries ago. In the future, radiocarbon dating of the seeds and a detailed analysis of the bag's material are planned. Once these studies are complete, more will be known about its exact age and origin.
The dog sitter accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets. During our trip, we left our 2 dogs in the care of a dog sitter we found through a specialized pet sitting service. The guy seemed very nice and responsible. Before leaving, we carefully explained all the rules to him. We showed him where the dog food was stored, how exactly to feed the dogs, the proportions for mixing their food, and where all the necessary supplies were kept. In addition,
We left a written instruction sheet with all the details so he wouldn't run into any difficulties. On the morning before our departure, we even fed the dogs together with him so he could see with his own eyes exactly how everything was done. It seemed to us that after such an explanation, it would be almost impossible to make a mistake. Throughout the trip, he stayed in touch with us and occasionally sent messages about how our pets were doing. Because of that, we were confident that everything was going smoothly. But one morning, he texted us saying the dogs were refusing to eat their breakfast. We didn't think much of it, since that sometimes happens when the owners are away from home. When we returned home, the first thing I noticed was the strange appearance of the food in their bowls. Normally, we don't just give them dry kibble. We pour hot water over it, add a bit of goat's milk, and mix in a digestive prebiotic. The result is a mixture that looks like a dark porridge. But this time, something looked completely wrong. It was much darker than usual and had an unusual texture. I asked my husband what that strange mass in the bowls was. Soon it became clear that the problem was much serious. When we went upstairs, we saw that the dogs had vomited on our bed. The sight was very unpleasant, but even worse was realizing that there were strange pieces mixed in with the vomit. That's when we understood what had happened. The dog sitter had accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets meant for a grill, mistaking them for dog food. These pellets were stored in a large bag on the floor in the pantry. The package clearly said grill pellets in large letters. Right next to it was the container with the dog food, which was also clearly labeled. Apparently, on the first night after we left, the dogs ate those pellets. After that, they started feeling unwell, which is why they refused food afterward. Judging by everything, they had gone almost 2 days without eating. We immediately called our veterinarian. Since it was Sunday, the doctor promised to call us back a bit later. In the meantime, we were advised to closely monitor the dog's condition and watch for any new symptoms. At the same time, we contacted a pet poison control hotline. They explained that wood pellets themselves are usually not highly toxic. However, they can cause serious stomach discomfort, digestive problems, or even an intestinal blockage. The situation was complicated by the fact that pellets can be made from different types of wood. Some types of wood can be dangerous for dogs. Among the potentially toxic ones are oak, cherry, plum, prune, horse chestnut, and yew. We checked the composition of our pellets. They contained hickory and maple. In addition, similar blends sometimes include flavorings or even leftover wood from whiskey barrels, which means the composition can be quite varied. That's why we decided not to take any risks and drove to a 24-hour veterinary clinic. Meanwhile, my husband called the dog sitter and told him what had happened. The guy was shocked and began sincerely apologizing. He explained that he hadn't understood exactly where the dog food was and mistakenly used the wrong bag. We also reported the incident to the service through which we had hired him. They opened an official case and said they would conduct an investigation. It also turned out that the platform provides insurance coverage of up to $25,000 for veterinary expenses. At the clinic, the dogs were examined and given x-rays. Fortunately, the veterinarians found no signs of an intestinal blockage. That was a huge relief for us. However, the vets warned us to monitor the dogs carefully over the next few days. It was especially important to watch for any symptoms related to kidney problems, since certain types of wood can cause toxic reactions. Luckily, the next morning things already looked much better. Both dogs ate normally and were able to go to the bathroom. The food stayed down, and there were no new episodes of vomiting. It seemed that their bodies had handled the problem. Despite that, the stress we experienced was enormous. What surprised me most was that we specifically showed the dog sitter where the food was and had even fed the dogs together with him before leaving.
That's why it's very hard to understand how he could confuse the dog food container with a large bag of wood pellets. After this incident, we decided to move the pellet bag to a different place so that something like this would never happen again. Fortunately, everything turned out well this time, but the story shows just how important it is to be extremely careful when it comes to the health of our pets.
The dog sitter accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets. During our trip, we left our 2 dogs in the care of a dog sitter we found through a specialized pet sitting service. The guy seemed very nice and responsible. Before leaving, we carefully explained all the rules to him. We showed him where the dog food was stored, how exactly to feed the dogs, the proportions for mixing their food, and where all the necessary supplies were kept. In addition, we left a written instruction sheet with all the details so he wouldn't run into any difficulties. On the morning before our departure, we even fed the dogs together with him so he could see with his own eyes exactly how everything was done. It seemed to us that after such an explanation, it would be almost impossible to make a mistake. Throughout the trip, he stayed in touch with us and occasionally sent messages about how our pets were doing. Because of that, we were confident that everything was going smoothly. But one morning, he texted us saying the dogs were refusing to eat their breakfast. We didn't think much of it, since that sometimes happens when the owners are away from home. When we returned home, the first thing I noticed was the strange appearance of the food in their bowls. Normally, we don't just give them dry kibble. We pour hot water over it, add a bit of goat's milk, and mix in a digestive prebiotic. The result is a mixture that looks like a dark porridge. But this time, something looked completely wrong. It was much darker than usual and had an unusual texture. I asked my husband what that strange mass in the bowls was.
Soon it became clear that the problem was much serious. When we went upstairs, we saw that the dogs had vomited on our bed. The sight was very unpleasant, but even worse was realizing that there were strange pieces mixed in with the vomit. That's when we understood what had happened. The dog sitter had accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets meant for a grill, mistaking them for dog food. These pellets were stored in a large bag on the floor in the pantry. The package clearly said grill pellets in large letters. Right next to it was the container with the dog food, which was also clearly labeled. Apparently, on the first night after we left, the dogs ate those pellets. After that, they started feeling unwell, which is why they refused food afterward. Judging by everything, they had gone almost 2 days without eating. We immediately called our veterinarian. Since it was Sunday, the doctor promised to call us back a bit later. In the meantime, we were advised to closely monitor the dog's condition and watch for any new symptoms. At the same time, we contacted a pet poison control hotline. They explained that wood pellets themselves are usually not highly toxic. However, they can cause serious stomach discomfort, digestive problems, or even an intestinal blockage. The situation was complicated by the fact that pellets can be made from different types of wood. Some types of wood can be dangerous for dogs. Among the potentially toxic ones are oak, cherry, plum, prune, horse chestnut, and yew. We checked the composition of our pellets. They contained hickory and maple. In addition, similar blends sometimes include flavorings or even leftover wood from whiskey barrels, which means the composition can be quite varied. That's why we decided not to take any risks and drove to a 24-hour veterinary clinic. Meanwhile, my husband called the dog sitter and told him what had happened. The guy was shocked and began sincerely apologizing. He explained that he hadn't understood exactly where the dog food was and mistakenly used the wrong bag. We also reported the incident to the service through which we had hired him. They opened an official case and said they would conduct an investigation. It also turned out that the platform provides insurance coverage of up to $25,000 for veterinary expenses. At the clinic, the dogs were examined and given x-rays. Fortunately, the veterinarians found no signs of an intestinal blockage. That was a huge relief for us. However, the vets warned us to monitor the dogs carefully over the next few days. It was especially important to watch for any symptoms related to kidney problems, since certain types of wood can cause toxic reactions. Luckily, the next morning things already looked much better. Both dogs ate normally and were able to go to the bathroom. The food stayed down and there were no new episodes of vomiting. It seemed that their bodies had handled the problem. Despite that, the stress we experienced was enormous. What surprised me most was that we specifically showed the dog sitter where the food was and had even fed the dogs together with him before leaving. That's why it's very hard to understand how he could confuse the dog food container with a large bag of wood pellets. After this incident, we decided to move the pellet bag to a different place so that something like this would never happen again. Fortunately, everything turned out well this time, but the story shows just how important it is to be extremely careful when it comes to the health of our pets. My boyfriend tried to put my dog to sleep. I'm 23 years old, and I had been dating my boyfriend, Jay, for 3 years. We lived together in a rented apartment, and overall, everything seemed perfectly normal. We didn't have any serious conflicts, which is why what happened came as a complete shock to me. On Friday morning, Jay left for the other side of the country to help his family. That same day, while I was at work, I unexpectedly received a call from my former college roommate, Bob. We used to live together at university, and now he works at a veterinary clinic about 80 kilometers from my home. He asked if I had a dog named Stixie. I immediately became worried and said yes. Then Bob told me that someone had brought a dog that looked very much like mine to their clinic to have it euthanized. He sent me a photo. The dog in the picture was mine. I recognized Stixie instantly. I grew up with him. When I left for university, he was so attached to me that I didn't even consider leaving him at home. He moved with me. Bob decided not to perform the procedure yet and kept the dog with him while trying to figure out what was going on. After work, I immediately drove to him and picked up Stixie. Then Bob showed me something else that completely confirmed what had happened. He had recorded a piece of security camera footage from the veterinary clinic on his phone. In the video, you could clearly see my boyfriend Jay bringing my dog to the clinic. He was even wearing the same clothes he had left the house in that morning before I went to work. When I saw that, I was literally speechless. I couldn't understand why he would do something like that. That day, Jay sent me several messages, just like he usually did when traveling somewhere. He asked how I was doing and whether everything was okay. I replied almost the same way I normally would. But now, every message from him felt completely different. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what he was thinking and what exactly he was trying to hide. I was half in shock and half completely numb. Instead of immediately getting angry, I started going through all possible reasons for his actions in my head. We had sometimes talked about the future. We discussed that in a few years we might move closer to his family in the north or even abroad, but none of that explained why he would decide to get rid of my dog. I was torn between the urge to call him immediately, start a huge argument, throw all his things out of the house, and the desire to stay silent and think everything through first. In the end, I decided not to tell him anything until I figured out what to do next. The first question was practical: how to protect myself and my dog. The apartment we lived in was rented in my name. The lease listed only me, even though Jay paid half of the rent. Because of that, I started looking into whether I could quickly make him move out. My dog, Stixie, was with me at that moment. He's 11 years old. He's gained a bit of weight and moves slower than he did when he was younger, but overall he's healthy. I called a coworker and told her what had happened. She immediately offered to help and even came over to my place so I wouldn't have to be alone. We talked for a long time and discussed the best way to handle things when Jay returned. After that, I started looking into the legal details. It turned out that since only my name was on the lease and we had no written agreements with Jay, he was not officially a tenant. That meant getting him out of the apartment would be much easier than I had originally thought. We decided that when he came back, I wouldn't be alone with him. There would be people in the house to support me. When Jay finally returned, the conversation started with lies. At first, he pretended to be surprised and said he didn't understand where Stixie had gone. He even offered to help look for him. Then he insisted that he knew nothing about anyone taking the dog to a vet to have it euthanized. When he was shown the security footage, he started making up new explanations. First, he claimed that Stixie had supposedly been hit by a car and that he only wanted to end his suffering. But when a living and completely healthy dog was standing right in front of him, that story fell apart too. Then he started getting tangled in his own words and excuses. At one point, the situation became so absurd that he even said, "Maybe I should have put you to sleep instead." After that, any conversation lost all meaning. Together with my coworker and her partner, I told him that he was no longer welcome in the house and that he needed to take his things and leave. Fortunately, he didn't start a scene and eventually left on his own. I never received any logical explanation for why he tried to get rid of my dog. The only thing left after this whole story was the realization that the person I trusted for 3 years of my life turned out to be nothing like the person I thought he was. And Stixie stayed with me, alive and healthy. Dog.
I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life over 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake through mutual friends. He was 23 at the time. He had already graduated and was planning to move across the country to pursue graduate school. I was also planning a move, with friends, to a city just an hour and a half away from where he was going. We had a lot in common. We fell in love, and it felt like fate. Both of us planning to move 4,000 kilometers and almost to the same place. Jake had 2 sisters and a younger brother. They were all great people, and I got along with them right away. Since Jake was in grad school and I was working, I usually visited him on weekends. He rented a house with 2 roommates from his program. We were young, didn't have much money, but we had fun. We went on cheap dates and spent a lot of time at home. Jake bred and sold small animals. It was part of his studies. He was studying animal science, so being surrounded by animals was normal for him, and honestly, I didn't mind it. I met the wife of his academic advisor, Mary. She was around 50 and worked in the university administration. A wonderful woman. We often had lunch together when I visited. In fact, I connected with people from his program even more easily than he did. But about 2 years into the relationship, something strange happened. One day we were lying in bed at his place, partially undressed, and he suddenly said that he was bothered by the fact that I had gained weight, and that it was becoming harder for him to feel attracted to me. Not a word about health, just that he found me less attractive. I sat up and calmly replied, "Maybe you should make sure I have proper food when I visit you instead of just crackers and cheese." I had gained maybe 4 kilograms since we met. I wore the same clothing size, and even at 23, I wasn't going to tolerate that kind of nonsense. I didn't argue. It was his problem, not mine. So I just asked, "So what's your solution?" He looked me blankly and said, "I think you should try to lose weight." I replied, "No, I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do?" He said, "Probably nothing. I just wanted to tell you how I feel." "Great, thanks." I got dressed, went to sleep, and left the next day like usual. We kept dating. But about 3 months later, he called and said he wanted to break up after nearly 3 years together. The reason? And I quote, "You're not scientific enough." I thought, what kind of nonsense is that? He seriously claimed that he couldn't talk to me about his work without using scientific animal terminology. I said, "That's ridiculous. What's the real reason?" But he insisted that was the reason. A month later, he came to return my things, and I made him tell the truth. Eventually, he gave in. It turned out he had been seeing one of his students. Let's call her Mac. She was 19, he was 26, and he was her instructor. I exploded. I yelled at him to get out. My roommate even threatened to throw him off the 2nd floor if he didn't leave, and he left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I broke down, from rage to hysterical laughter. I had seen Mac before, and suddenly it all clicked. At a barbecue at his place once, she had spilled something on her pants. Jake asked if I could lend her a pair of sweatpants. I couldn't. I wore a size 44-46, and she was significantly bigger. And suddenly everything made sense. His comment about my weight was never about me. He just wanted me to break up with him because he was a coward. He liked a completely different type of girl, but didn't have the courage to say it. But you know what really got to me? He said it at night when I was 150 kilometers from home, after we had been intimate. Did he really think I would just snap, turn around, and drive home in the middle of the night? After that, I messaged his roommates. I thanked them for everything and told them we had broken up. And they already knew. They said they had demanded he tell me the truth. Otherwise, they would have told me themselves. That's why he came up with that nonsense about me not being scientific enough. One of the roommates, George, was a very sweet and attractive guy. He offered to bring my things over and said, "Come over this weekend. We'll have some drinks, relax." The kind of thing Jake never wanted to spend money on. I agreed. I came over. Jake wasn't home. George let me in. And that's when things got interesting. I started taking photos of all his animals because I knew one important thing. He had an animal that was on the endangered species list, and you couldn't legally keep it without a permit. All he had to do was file paperwork and pay $25, but he always said, "I don't want the government in my business." I photographed everything, the conditions, the cages, and another animal that was completely illegal to keep in that state. It was right by the window, visible from the street. Then George and I went into town. We got back around midnight, and we made sure Jake and Max saw us. Me in a short dress, a little drunk, George almost carrying me. We were loud on purpose, laughing, joking, even pretending there was something going on between us so they could hear. I spent the night in George's room. He behaved like a gentleman, but a few times walked out into the hallway just in his boxers. Pure coincidence, of course. In the morning, as I was leaving, Jake said, "You don't have to act like a..." I slowly ate a donut in a wrinkled dress with messy hair. George kissed me on the top of my head. Max sat there not knowing where to look. I smiled and said, "Enjoy my leftovers," and left. At the time, I thought that was my revenge. But no, that was just the beginning. The next day, I developed the film. Yes, the good old days, and immediately called the Department of Natural Resources. I reported everything: the animals, the conditions, the overcrowding, and especially the two that were illegal to keep in that state. I simply asked how to properly file a report, and then I did.
I destroyed my ex-boyfriend's life more than 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. As it turned out, Jake wasn't liked. Not by his classmates, not even by his own roommates. But me? People liked me. George and another roommate decided to take things further. They filed a complaint with the university about a teaching assistant who was sleeping with his student and giving her preferential treatment. That same night we went bar hopping. They told the story to everyone they knew. The program was small, and the news spread fast. I made another move, too. I called Mary, his advisor's wife, and I told her directly he admitted himself that he's sleeping with a student. I even had his emails where he confirmed it. I sent them to her. Mary was furious. She immediately passed everything to her husband, Jake's advisor. And then it all started. A couple of weeks later, George calls me, emotional. They're here, inspectors. They're taking the animals. Mac was at home, and trying to save the situation, she said, all the animals belong to Jake. That automatically cleared the roommates of responsibility. The inspectors knew exactly where to look. They were tipped off about the back window, where the most problematic animal was, the one that was almost never legal to keep. Since George was on the lease, he had the right to let them in. All the animals were kept in shared spaces. The inspectors worked for several hours. Then they came back with a warrant.
They took all the animals and searched Jake's room. The only thing they left were a few guppies in a tank. Now, the most painful part for him. Graduate students live off grants, and he had just received a federal grant around the time we broke up. I called them and simply asked, how do I report that someone with a federal grant is under investigation for illegal animal possession? The result? He lost the grant and had to pay back nearly $30,000. He will never be able to get federal funding again. He wasn't jailed. The animals were in decent condition, but he lost all his animals, paid about $15,000 in fines. 2 animals were transferred to a wildlife center. The university didn't stay out of it either. He lost his stipend, was fired from teaching, essentially had his academic career destroyed, and all because of one thing. He was sleeping with a student. He couldn't even wait 4 weeks until the end of the course when it would have been technically allowed. His arrogance destroyed him. A few months later, I wrote to his sisters, told them I missed them. They replied and told me he had lied to the family, said I broke up with him because of distance. I just forwarded him his own email where he said he had fallen in love with Mac. And that settled everything. I moved on, finished my studies, built a career. And you know what I do now? I help scientists and doctors explain complex things in simple terms. Ironic, right? And him? He married Mac, 2 kids, went back to breeding animals. 20 years passed, and one day I'm giving a lecture at a university, 250 people in the room, and suddenly I hear, "Hey, long time no see." I turn around. It's him, Jake. I pretended I didn't recognize him. "Sorry, do I know you?" He said, "It's me, Jake." I paused and said, I guess my memory just erased you," and walked away. Later, I found out he was there for a job interview for a teaching position. They were seriously considering hiring him. And then I said just one sentence. "It's strange he's still teaching after what happened at University X." That was enough. They checked and found everything. The scandal with the student, the lost grant, the investigation, the old complaints. And you know what? He didn't get the job. Karma. Sometimes it works perfectly. And my conclusion? If the person who's supposed to love you humiliates you because of your appearance, the problem isn't you. The problem is them.
A grumpy teacher once threatened to send me to the principal's office. Fine by me. I was more than happy to let the principal know about this teacher's nonsense. This all happened over 10 years ago, so some of the details are a little blurry. It was the start of my senior year in high school. I went to a tiny rural school where the top students were moved into a separate building to take dual enrollment college classes online. The woman who supervised us had been working in the district for over 15 years. She knew all of us, our families, had taught us in different grades, and even coached half of us in track or tennis. Keep in mind, the entire school from kindergarten through 12th grade barely had 500 students. She trusted us, made sure we kept up with our online work, and otherwise let us use our time productively once our main assignments were done. For me, that meant practicing guitar and reading tactical guides for the next sports competition. I was a decent student, just extremely lazy. Then came the first day of senior year. Our beloved supervisor moved away because her husband got a better job, and in her place walked this tall, red-headed guy no one had ever seen before. He turned out to be the new girls' basketball coach and our online program supervisor. Since college courses wouldn't start for a couple weeks, he spent the entire day bragging how lucky we were to have him. He'd spent the last decade at a university, so he knew how the system worked. He promised to make sure we didn't slack off since we were seniors. The fact that he left a university to teach at a rural high school should have been a red flag to whoever hired him, but whatever. For the first couple of weeks, this coach, let's call him Bob, made us do pointless busy work, APA format essays on respect, or searching for new car listings for his wife with citations. His excuse was that he was preparing us. We politely explained that dual enrollment classes from a state college were usually harder than normal high school ones, except maybe math and science, but he ignored us. When the courses finally began, Bob only got worse. He constantly insulted students if they did something he didn't like, or if their political views didn't match his university background. He insisted we submit every assignment to him first, before sending them to the actual professors. The problem? He graded slowly, and plenty of us lost points for late submissions. Eventually, we just started sending our work directly to the professors, while copying him to avoid trouble. Bob also claimed we weren't mature enough for this kind of learning, even though the program required at least a 3.0 GPA to stay in, and our average was closer to 3.8. According to him, if it were up to him, he'd drag our entitled butts back to the main school building. The breaking point came at the end of the fall semester. Finals were over, and we were waiting for break. Bob stormed in that morning in even fouler mood than usual. Later, I learned it was the day his divorce proceedings began, and he started yelling at one girl about her clothes. She ignored him like the rest of us. That just made him angrier. He launched into another rant about how terrible and arrogant we all were. Nobody cared. Realizing he couldn't punish us for anything, he turned on one guy in particular. This student had been placed in our class because it was a quiet environment, and he was actually the only one working at that moment. The exchange went something like this. Bob: "So, what are you even doing over there?" Student: "Just trying to study for my exams so I don't fail the year." Bob: "And what for? So you can flip burgers at Dairy Inn?" That kid, my cousin, by the way, later became a welder and earns a solid living. At the time, though, he was struggling hard, both academically and personally, and I knew how much effort he was putting in to get back on track. Despite his kind heart, people outside our family often labeled him a failure,
And here was Bob tearing into the most vulnerable kid in the room, my own family. That was the moment I lost it. It was time to get back at him in the strongest way possible, without hurting myself or ending up in trouble. By then, my mom had already been teaching in the district for over 25 years, and my stepdad, though retired, had been a school psychologist. I knew the rules ins and out. Up until that point, I had held back from telling my parents the full truth about his behavior, mainly because Coach Bob's daughter had already become part of our friend group. I realized how rough things would get for her if her dad lost his job. His reputation already made her school life difficult. But since she was set to leave for college in another state after graduation, the collateral damage would be minimal. Knowing what I knew, I casually dropped the line. "Coach Bob, if you actually knew half as much about basketball as you think you know about my cousin, you'd still be at the university, or at the very least, the school board would have renewed your contract at the last meeting. So, where exactly are you planning to work after this year wraps up?" The classroom went dead silent. That information wasn't public yet. Bob's face flushed bright red. His voice shook as he barked, "Out, now!" I calmly set down my book and walked into the hallway. Bob followed, shut the door, and then exploded, screaming in my face for nearly 4 straight minutes. He threw every insult he could muster, calling me a lazy, arrogant piece of trash who'd fooled every teacher, coach, and even his daughter, but not him. According to him, I'd never amount to anything in life and just coast along off my family's name. I'll give him this, his lung capacity was impressive. I don't think he even took a breath during the whole rant. When he finally stopped, I asked politely, "Coach Bob, may I go back to my reading now?" He roared even louder, "No, you're going straight to the principal's office, and you're going to repeat every single word you just said. Got it?" "Yes, sir," I answered calmly. "I'd be glad to. Actually, I was planning to ask the principal for a recommendation letter for a scholarship anyway. And of course, he'll want to know why I said what I said. I wouldn't be able to lie about it, so I'd have to mention our little chat here." At exactly that moment, another teacher, who also happened to be a relative of mine, stepped into the hallway to check out the noise. She caught the tail end of Bob's tirade. She looked ready to intervene, but I gave her a smile and a quick wink. I had it under control. At 18, I felt like I was on top of the world. Bob marched me back into the classroom, but didn't send me to the office immediately. I waited by the door, expecting him to follow through. Minutes ticked by. Finally, he muttered, "Sit down, Jones." "Coach Bob, I think the rules call for a trip to the principal's office after what just happened." "If you insist," he snapped, his voice rising again, but by then he realized the corner he had backed himself into. He scribbled out a referral slip, and I gladly walked down to the office. The principal was shocked to see me, and even more shocked that I was there for a disciplinary issue. I explained what happened. In the end, I got 1 day of after-school detention for being openly disrespectful, which honestly I probably deserved. The next 2 weeks were pure bliss. Bob barely said a word. Most of the time, he either glared at me or scrolled job postings. By the start of spring semester, he was gone. Turns out he'd already accepted another position before Christmas break and left early to be ready for spring training. Funny coincidence, right? Years later, I found out he didn't last there either. He was fired not long after, and his marriage ended too. Other teachers had complained about him for years, and apparently he'd been skating on thin ice well before my little stunt. Honestly, writing this all out now, I almost feel sorry for the guy. Almost.